defenders of justice and truth have been ambushed by the evil magicians, the Dire Wraiths. The Soul Star Order has prevailed and are now seeking out their scattered enemies. One of these knights has followed the trail of the Dire Wraiths all the way to Earth. This one the Dire Wraiths fear more than all others. This one has hounded them and kept them underground for centuries. This one alone could wipe them off the face of creation. He is Rom, Lord of the Soul Star Order. Rom the Wraith Slayer. Rom the Space Knight. Even he must be careful. The Dire Wraiths can assume any form they wish. Rom counters this with the energy analyzer. With it, he can see through appearances and determine the true essence of any being. Rom also has a weapon unique to his order, the neutralizer, which can disorganize any molecular structure. He has rocket pods, which can instantly send him soaring. He has a translator through which he can communicate with any intelligent being in the universe. And his respirator allows him to breathe in any atmosphere. Rom, Lord of the Soul Star Order. Rom the Wraith Slayer. Rom the Space Knight. A microelectronic creation from Parker Brothers.
Hello, ladies, gentlemen, non-binary folks everywhere, and welcome to Action and Adventure, the Hasbro Universe podcast. I'm your host, Daniel, and today we're bringing you a very special interview. Joining me today is a man that I have had the tremendous pleasure of meeting, a man who was instrumental to the creation of the Hasbro Universe and personally brought back one of my favorite characters from comic book limbo. Ladies, gentlemen, non-binary folks everywhere, welcome to the show, the one, the only, the Mr. Chris Ryall. Chris, thank you so much for being here. Give him a round of applause,
thank
everybody.
you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, well, you know, I don't say things that aren't true. So, so Chris, let's just jump right in. You have been for the longest time now the editor-in-chief of IDW, a position that you have recently left after 14 years?
Yeah, 14 years this coming June, so just about. And I'm sorry, I know this this makes it a harder intro. He used to do this. Now we're not sure what he's doing.
Yes. So really, I guess there's really just one question. What, the biggest question, let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. What led to this decision? I think 14 years. I think it's just that, I'd never done anything for 14 years before, and so I loved everything I was able to do at IDW. I think I reached a point where it just felt like time to try something new. You sort of stare down two paths. One is just, do I keep doing the same thing that is comfortable and easy, which great. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. And do I, not mess with a good thing? And there's a lot to be said for that too. And then the other option is, do I do something that's sort of scary and intimidating and weird and, feels like dating after a divorce and all of those things? And I thought, well, at this point in my career, I should do that while it feels daunting and intimidating, because I think the fact that it sounds scary to me felt like a really good reason to do it. Let's try something new and sort of just see where a lot of different things that I've kicked around and people I've talked to and partnerships I've wanted to make and all these things over the years that have come up and I'd not pursued. It just felt like, well, let's give that a go and see where it all leads. So you can confirm that it is not due to a vast conspiracy theory that said that Hasbro was pushing you out after the events of Scarlet Strike Force happened?
Oh no! Is that one of the? It's funny because since I left, I've not tried to spend too much time reading the nonsense, but I've seen a little bit of that spring up. I hadn't seen Hasbro mentioned, but I'd seen that. Let me see. The way I saw it put on Twitter from people was "Get woke, go broke," which I thought was at least they're trying to be amusing in their hateful ways. But yeah, it's funny that there's been all these. I just thought
I'll move on, and I'll go on to the next thing, and that'll be that. And I didn't think I would be subject to any kind of like rumors or stories or lies or any of those things. So it's kind of amusing and also saddening and frustrating to see. But yeah, no, Hasbro loved, like, I love working with Hasbro. Hasbro loved working with me. Like, I think you would talk to anybody at Hasbro and they would say the same. So no, there was nothing. I mean, if anything, it took everybody else by surprise, because I'd sort of been thinking about this for, I don't know, maybe a couple years now. Just like, is it a good move to go explore other things? And so I think it caught IDW and Hasbro by surprise, because they said, well, wait, we all got a good thing going here. And I said, yeah, you do, and you will, and it'll continue that way. Just, I think, they'll find somebody else who will fill those shoes at IDW, and then I'll go out and try something else. And that's all it was. So to see it after the fact sort of get brought up it was so crazy. Like, I was leaving. One of the rumors I saw, and I don't know if this is too far down the rabbit hole, but one of the rumors was that I was leaving to then bring Aubrey back under an assumed name or something like that to further our agenda. But at the same time, like, Aubrey didn't seem happy because his book ended, sooner than he would have wanted. And so it was just like, well, wait, which side is upset? Is everybody upset? So no, it's interesting to see. And I mean, there were, like, my wife stumbled across a couple of videos on YouTube that were just so vitriolic. And she was just like, what's going on out there? And I'm like, oh, that's kind of just the world we live in. Like, don't watch them and don't get upset by them. And that's, people have opinions, and that's fine. And there's no point in trying to debunk all those opinions and to sort of tell what really went on, which is nothing other than just deciding to move on after so long. Because people are going to think what they're going to think. So it's like, all right, well, it's weird and strange and a bummer, but no, there was nothing behind it. There was no forcing out, which I'm sort of amused by that's even a scenario that people have put together. But no, honestly, it was just, 14 years, like, that's an awful long time. Like, that outlasts a lot of celebrity marriages. And so it was just like, there's only so much time you have to contribute to the comic industry if you're lucky enough. And I felt really lucky to be able to do that. And I thought, well, I want to try to contribute in other ways and pursue some other things. And so that was the entire impetus behind it. There was nothing beyond that.
Okay. I mean, I just wanted to, like, make sure that we got that, like, out on the table, like, to begin with. Cause yeah, it's remarkable to me personally that there's been all these crazy conspiracies and especially in regards to stuff like the Hasbro Universe, which has certainly, just in my own experience as someone who kind of lurks around the Transformers fandom and the G.I. Joe fandom, it definitely seemed to be a very what's the word I'm looking for? A divisive decision.
Yeah.
Now, the genesis of that really was that really with ROM, or like, where did the genesis of the Hasbro Universe really begin? Because we've heard some, like, stuff that like Christos Gage said he wanted to bring in G.I. Joe, and then there was the Micronauts and all that. For you, at least, in your perspective, where did the Hasbro Universe where did that idea first start?
Well, it's funny, we talked about it years ago with G.I. Joe and Transformers because, there's a storied history of G.I. Joe and Transformers meeting up, and they've always been these specials and miniseries and out-of-continuity types of things. And we thought, well, we now have a chance to put them together for good, but let's not do that yet. Let's not force it. Let's just wait until, there's a real reason for it to make sense. And so we'd talked about it, but not pursued that to any degree. And then, in ROM, Christos and I were talking about, like, how do we, like, it's one thing to bring back this character that we love, but, maybe other people aren't as familiar with him as we are. So let's figure out some kind of cool ending that really intrigues people and keeps people engaged at the end of issue 1. So we thought, well, the best way to do this would be to have a Dire Wraith. Once we've introduced the idea that Dire Wraiths have infiltrated the military and positions of power and things like that, a Wraith gets into a helicopter and says, "Yo, Joe," and you go, "Oh man, wait a minute. Not only is a Dire Wraith, in G.I. Joe, but G.I. Joe is part of this universe." And so we were going to build to it slowly over time, and in the 21st century, I don't think there are slow builds anymore. Like when I was a kid, it was, you could take 10 issues or 12 issues to build to this big thing. But, I don't think it's that sort of world anymore. And so it was like, once word sort of got out to various factions that we wanted to do this, it was like, oh yeah, then let's make this a big thing. Let's do the universe right now. Let's not wait your 6 months, or let's not build slowly. Let's just have this thing explode out of the gates in a big way. And so that was sort of the basis for Revolution. So, but yeah, we planned to do it slowly, and then at some point, the Micronauts would come in, because we thought that was the one thing as kids reading Rom and Micronauts, and they were written by the same writer, and they were published at the same publisher, but they could still never meet up. And like now there was a chance that they could actually meet up, and so we thought, well, let's do this thing that we've always wanted to see, as young readers, and so let's bring them in too. And then we wanted to launch Mask, and it made sense to launch Mask out of a bigger event. And so we put all that together, and then right around the time we were getting closer to finalizing the initial storyline, that's when we saw word that there was the Hasbro Universe on the film side too. And so it was like, all right, well, I guess great minds think alike, but they were sort of developed independently, and the film things always sort of move in unexpected directions and unexpected speeds, and so we could sort of jump into it really quickly and just let it go. And I it's funny because I thought, like, a lot of the complaints when we announced ROM was people going, well, this isn't going to work. ROM needs the Marvel Universe around it. And so my thinking was, all right, well, now we're going to give it a universe. It's going to have a universe of characters around it. It's going to have Transformers and Micronauts and G.I. Joe and all of that if we ever need it. And then once it launched, people were like, well, ROM doesn't belong as part of a universe. ROM should be his own thing. So, you're never going to please everybody, because everybody has different things that they want to see. But we tried to we tried to work it into a universe in a way that made sense, but I think we didn't feel too forced.
I think when a lot of those fans, I don't think they're the same like group. I feel like it's the Marvel fans like say that ROM needs to be here in the Marvel universe. And then it's the people who don't care about ROM, who just don't want him in their peanut butter, I feel like. That's just my opinion, of course.
Yeah, and it does. Like, the G.I. Joe fans, very, very clearly only want a G.I. Joe series. And primarily they only want a G.I. Joe series written by Larry Hama. And the Transformer fans, were very happy with what James and John were doing in their books. And so then to introduce these outside elements to it, I get it. Like, there's always a concern that it's going to affect the storytelling, and you're going to have events sort of get in the way of the stuff that they like, and you never want to feel like marketing is driving the storytelling. And so I definitely, as a longtime comic reader, like, I understand those concerns, and so we tried to approach it as smartly as we could, and not offend fans in the way that I knew they were worried about it. But you're always going to. You always run that risk anyway when you're doing these kinds of things.
Right, yeah. Now, Rom is, of course, a character that, as anyone who knew you even before the Rom series came out, you were a huge fan of. Getting to bring that character back in a very different setting, like, what sort of creative challenges did that really present you with, really only having these bare minimum concepts of the character?
I mean, at its core, like, you have Rom as this sort of shining alien cyborg knight who's out to fight off the evil alien invaders who can disguise themselves as anybody and anything. And so the core of what I loved about the old series is still there, and so that part wasn't a problem. But yeah, it's hard. Like, whenever you're a fan of something as a kid, like, those things lodge in your head so much that you're like, I just kind of want to see more of the same, but I don't want to replicate and I don't want to copy. So I need to change this thing and make it something different. And yet, if it gets too different, then you get too far away from the core. So what we tried to do was we tried to keep Rom's personality, or his sort of heroic demeanor and sort of his tortured demeanor, still the core of who he is, because at the end of it, it's still a humanish character who's trapped forever inside this armor. And so that that way you sort of maintain a lot of the sort of overwrought Silver Surfery aspects of his personality, which is just that he's tortured. He's had to give up everything he knew and loved just to go out and fight this seemingly never-ending war. So all of that was what we kept as the core of our ROM. And then you try to find unique ways to do things that either people haven't seen or that certainly as longtime fans like us, we didn't want to give people something that just felt like a retread. And so you try to push it in different directions and play up sort of the mysticism and then have different casts of wraiths. So it's not just like the one thing I will say about, 80s comics and certainly something like ROM was it was like they were born on an evil planet, so they're evil. Like, well, maybe the world isn't, and no worlds are quite that one-dimensional. So we tried to play up the idea that, there were wraiths who were tortured by the war, or wraiths who didn't believe in the cause, or just wraiths who were decent, and so you sort of have all of that underneath what you're trying to do, which is just, keep telling big, fun, action-y comics. So you can't, there's some stuff we wanted to do at the start that we didn't have time to get to, but it was basically trying to take the DNA of the thing we loved and find new stories and new ways to tell those stories. And then also, how do we introduce new space knights or new Knights of the Soul Star Order, I guess it is, without feeling derivative of anything Marvel's done. So, it casts a big shadow, and you also don't want to be the guy who's such a slavish fan to the thing you loved as a kid that you can't move ahead and tell new stories. But the one thing I was happy about is we were able to keep in large measure the look of ROM. I mean, I know people complained about the boots, and they complained about, giving him fingers instead of the mitten hands, and the head wasn't quite as squared off. But really, if you knew what ROM was, you could look at the new ROM and know that character without it being so utterly different, which I was happy with. And I guess I should say, since leaving IDW, I did write one more ROM story that was, contracted by IDW and approved by Hasbro. So as far as there being any ill will or any of those weird rumors, also debunked in that regard. I had fun being able to go back and revisit ROM one more time.
See, now that actually is very exciting because obviously you and Christos Gage started off as co-writers, and then you returning to your position as editor-in-chief kind of took a bit more of a hands-off approach. What was it like kind of working? What was it like working with Christos Gage and having a co-writer? What was that kind of process? Did that help since you were obviously very busy as the chief creative officer and other such things?
I mean, it was weird because neither one of us really worked with co-writers too much. I mean, I guess Christos does with Dan Slott on some of the Spider-Man stuff, but in a lot of ways there, I think he was working off plots and, then writing scripts himself. And a guy like Christos is so talented, he doesn't need a co-writer, but at the same time, I knew, I wanted to be involved in bringing back ROM. I'd also spent, years at conventions talking to Christos about what we might ever do if we got the chance to play with ROM. And so I knew that when we got the rights, I couldn't do this without him. I had to have him a part of things. And he made every story and script and dialogue better. But then it reached a point, when the main series was going away and then the Micronauts were coming in, I thought, well, that's getting maybe a bit too much into the universe and all the different continuities and stuff that I should be playing with. So, Christoph should run solo with that one and be able to just take it in whatever direction he wants without having to worry about, whether the different things we want to do all jive. But, it was nice. And and on the main series, having David Messina and then Paulo, we worked plot style, which again is not normally the way I work. I typically write full script. So, the artists, Paulo and David, were both very much a third storyteller on the book. It was not like writer handing the artist a script and saying, here, draw this. It was what do you guys think and how do you want to tell the story? And, they would do the pacing and sort of bring in new elements, and then we would dialogue it up. And so it was one of those things that makes comics so great. It's just the collaborative aspect of it all.
Yeah, I definitely, I think David Messina and Paulo definitely brought a very interesting visual to the character, to the book. So now you say you don't normally do plot style. What was sort of, why did you decide to do that for this book?
Partly it was because David Messina, as the artist, like deserves that sort of like ability to tell the story himself at this point. Like he's been working in comic for so long. Well, he got in right around the same time I started IDW. He was drawing Angel, was his first comic for an American publisher. And so, for the last 14 years, like he's drawn a ton of stories for different writers. And it's just, I like to try to encourage an artist's storytelling ability, not just have them have to draw whatever's written on the page, but sort of interpret it and pace it and tell the visual part of the story themselves in a much more free way. And I just thought, he's certainly ready for that. And he wanted to tell a story that way. And so it was nice to just be able to give him a little bit more free rein to do what suited him.
Interesting. Now, obviously you guys did not have a full 70 plus issue run like Bill Mantlo got to have back in Marvel. I'm curious, was it just flagging sales, or was it just kind of, because obviously we know that the Transformers continuity is coming to an end, and that sort of has seemed to imply the end of all the other books. And sorry if this question's a bit of a being a Debbie Downer, but what is kind of the if this is like was Rom's kind of one chance, like what was kind of the what's kind of your thoughts on that?
I mean, I certainly hope it's not his one and only chance to come back, and I doubt that it will be. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like I'm sure I overestimated the public's interest in a decades old character just because I loved it so much, and I thought, well, I've talked about it for 10 years straight to anybody who will listen. So of course they'll want to know what I'm talking about and jump on it. And at first, like it came out of the gate really strong. I think we did over 50 on the first issue. So I thought, oh my God, we're headed for a long run. But, things don't always go that way. And so, yeah, that's why you try different things. And that's why whenever there's talk in comics when they go, well, this happened and that publisher canceled that series prematurely because they're mad or they're this or they're that. Like, no. People only cancel series if they're not making money. And sometimes you publish stuff that doesn't make money because you believe in it or because it's going to sell later on as in the trade paperback or other things. But, if a book starts taking on too many losses, especially a book that is a licensed property where we're tasked with, we want to bring revenue into Hasbro and make their publishing division strong and all of those things. If a title is not doing that to the degree that we all want, then you bring that to an end and you start something new. And so that was essentially what happened with Rom, and I felt like it was okay for me to move on at that point because I got to bring the book back, I got to tell Rom's origin story, got to name and develop his planet again and these new Space Knight characters and all of that, and I got to work with Sal Buscema on a story. It was just like, well, that's everything I ever dreamt about doing, was being able to write a Rom comic and bring Rom back after a long absence and work with the co-creator on the book. And, I got to be very close with Michael Mantlo, who was, original Rom writer Bill Mantlo's brother, who's also, Bill Mantlo's long-term care provider. And so to be able to get close with the family in that way and do all of these things and stuff was like, like I say, that's really all I ever wanted with Rom. Except now, I want Rom to go on and thrive and become other things and sort of let other people take a crack at him and see what they would do with it. And so that's certainly what I hope to see happen. It was nice to come back and do one last story. And I wrote that one myself. Like it was just a 4-pager. So I didn't invite Christos back for it. I probably should have, and I'll have him go through and, give it a dialogue pass and everything. But I thought, well, I want to try to just tell this one story while I can. And, it finally does pay a little bit more obvious tribute to an old Rom story that, very few of us will probably get the reference, but those that do will hopefully enjoy it. And then, yeah, beyond that, like as far as the Hasbro Universe and stuff, we had talked about, again, for years, you talk about these things, and Unicron was one of those things. It was like, well, you could probably only play the Unicron card once because, he brings very foreboding, portentous things to whenever he shows up. And so it's like, you don't want Unicron to start being the Galactus where it's like, oh, we scared him away. All right, 2 years later, he'll be back. And 2 years later, he'll be back. And so, when Unicron shows up, like, the fans have waited an awful long time to see him in the IDW comics. And so it should have weighty importance to it. And with weighty importance sometimes comes death and destruction. And so that was sort of the gist of the conversation, was like, well, this has to mean dire consequences for someone or some things, just because otherwise there's no real threats. So yeah, that's, and beyond that, like where they take the storyline from here, I certainly know where things were headed, and what might come out of that and all of that. But, since I've stepped aside, I should probably just let them, discuss that and dole information out as they're ready. But yeah, I know it's a big thing. And that's why I was really happy to have John Barber be able to tell the story, because, not only can he wrap up what he's doing, but also, he knows this universe better than just about anybody. And Alex Milne can draw it better than just about anybody. He can put somehow 15 characters per panel in an 8-panel page and still make it clear and easy to follow with the eye. And so, yeah, I'm excited now. Like, it's fun to see these things come in at the office when you're working on them and to be a part of it. But I'm intrigued now because now I get to sit back as just a fan and see this stuff as it comes out and see how it all plays out, in each issue, which is a weird thing for me because I haven't been able to do that in so long. So it's going to be fun and strange to watch things from this side now.
How heavily involved were you during, because obviously there was that big Revolution Summit that when I've talked with people like John Barber or Brandon Easton in the past, they've all mentioned the Revolution Summit. How involved were you as the line kind of went on with stuff like First Strike and Visionaries and all that?
At that point, I really wasn't. I'd sort of stepped aside. I'd stepped aside as the editor-in-chief, so I was there for the kickoff of the summit and everything as we batted around ideas and talked about where this could all go. But then from there, that's when everything handed off to David Hedgecock as the editor-in-chief, and he was the lead editor that ran Revolution and then First Strike. And so other than co-writing ROM, I had sort of handed over the reins, and so I didn't really have any direct involvement over that stuff, because the thing you try to do is as the executive editor or the overseer on this stuff is not get in other people's way. And so I didn't want to hand off the editor-in-chief duties in title only. I don't want to be the guy that still second guesses everybody and goes, well, have you thought about this? Or maybe you should do this. You gotta sort of let people find their own way. And so I did that. I just, sort of helped get things started. And then I would say I was completely removed from the process. So I'd removed myself for the last, year and a half.
And now when you came back as editor-in-chief, did you kind of just dive right in? Or obviously, you're editor-in-chief of the entire company, so there was a lot more than just the Hasbro Universe, to it. But as far as once you came back to that position for the short time, did you really get as heavily involved, or did you just kind of still leave to the individual editors?
Yeah, I left it to them because, again, like you say, it was for a very short time. That was just the end of 2017, and by then I had already been sort of thinking about, what might come next. And, there was a good team in place handling that stuff, so I just sort of kept things as they were, and I focused a bit on sort of talking about post-Unicron thoughts and things like that. But yeah, I didn't get back involved and suddenly jump in the middle of storylines and say, well, no, course correct, to do this and stuff. So it has sort of stayed as it was.
Right. Let's go back to something you were talking about earlier. Getting to work with Sal Buscema, obviously a dream come true for not just any ROM fan, but any kind of classic Marvel fan. With the backup story Battle Scars, which was later collected just last week in Tales from the Soul Star Order. Talk a bit more about what was that just experience like, getting to work with someone who was so instrumental in the creation of a book that that you love so much. Was it intimidating?
No, only because I'd known and worked with Sal in various capacities for about the last 10 years, and he and I have gotten, it's weird to say very close because I've never met him in person, but like we've spent hours and hours on the phone talking about the business and approach to art and storytelling and just so many different things. I feel really close to the guy, and he's said some of just the greatest, nicest, most flattering things that he could say. And, for a guy that's been in the business for, 60 years, to hear those kinds of things from him and sort of have him compliment me in the way he has and say how close he feels and all of those things is like, it's a ridiculously weird feeling as a guy who grew up loving and reading his stuff, just to be in a position where I can not only, hire him and sort of thank him for everything he's done before, but also, develop a close personal relationship with the guy is, I recommend it. I recommend if you can ever get a chance to like work with and know your heroes. I know they always say don't meet your heroes, but I think, no, screw that. Go meet your heroes. And in a lot of cases, they're going to live up to your expectations and exceed them. And Sal certainly has. And so with the backup stories, like it was sort of multi-pronged agenda. One was there was other Space Knights and other stories we wanted to get to and just couldn't really donate the pages or dedicate the pages in the main storyline to do that. So just like in the old ROM series, when I was a kid, they started doing these Tales of the Space Knights backup stories. I wanted to do that to, pay tribute to what had come before and also to focus on these other characters. But really it was also personally motivated because I wanted to get Sal back involved on interiors in some way. And so Sal and then Guy Dorian Sr., who's worked with Sal also for years now and has such a sort of classic approach to his art, you'll never see a more Marvel-looking version of Rom in our comics than you will in the pages that they did together. And I love that. I love that we could sort of cheat things a little bit more and push it back toward, a bit more square-headed Rom and just to give Sal... Because the weird thing is, like, when I first had Sal do a cover for issue 1, like, I was directing him to draw the new version of Rom, and I thought, this is so wrong. Like, he's the guy that gave Rom the visual look on the comic page, and I'm now telling him that, no, that version you sort of pioneered and created is no longer in vogue. Like, you can't do that anymore. You got to change it to this. Like, that felt terrible. And so, Sal didn't mind. Like, he's like, look, there's been 20 different Iron Man suits, and when Iron Man changes, you draw the new Iron Man, and that's fine. So he was happy to do it. But for me, it still felt weird, like, having to art direct him to do our version instead of what I really wanted to see from him, which was his version. So all of that, like working on the backups and then putting them together in a single issue and, chatting with Sal a bit more about it for the backup feature and stuff was a thrill. Like, it was just so much fun to talk through, like, what he might want to do with the story, what he'd want to see. And I know, Guy did the penciling, but I did chat with Sal story-wise just because I wanted it to be a totally collaborative thing. And so I could tell people that, yeah, I worked with Sal Buscema on a ROM story.
Nice. I mean, like, that's the dream, really, for any ROM fanboy, I feel like, especially one in your position.
Yeah, it's funny. I tried to get Ditko, too, because Steve Ditko drew, the last, years worth of ROM stories, and Ditko was less interested in working on it than Sal was. I'm not entirely sure. He told me he wasn't really clear on who Rom was anymore, so he didn't want to do it. But I still reached out. I figured it was worth the ask.
I mean, definitely worth the ask. Although, I mean, let's face it, it's a very Ditko response from just. Obviously, I have not met the man in person, but from what I've heard from other people, that's.
Yeah, he's very happy to just do what he does and do his own thing and not work for corporations. Which if you can get to a point in your life where that's what you're able to do, like, God bless, like that's amazing.
Oh yeah. Now with the backup stories, Battle Scars was because it ran in like the last arc of ROM, and that was kind of the only one. It also, we at Action and Adventure kind of noticed that it kind of cut into the page count a little. Was that kind of a challenge for you as a writer to kind of be like, well, now I have less pages for the main story?
Or? Yeah, it sucks. Like 20 pages doesn't feel like enough per issue. I missed the days of 22-page comics or 24-page. So to cut it to 16 and try to tell a coherent story and not like leave people feeling cheated is definitely a challenge, because there's always some people that are going to view a backup as just this thing that truncates the main story, which is the main reason why they're buying the comic. And so you don't want people to feel like they didn't get enough of the lead story, and you want the backup story to be worth their while too. But yeah, it's hard to balance the two. That's why having people like Christos and then Paulo on the leads at that point, or they're very adept storytellers too, so we were able to hopefully fit a lot in there. But yeah, like I missed, I think 10 was probably our last full-length issue, and coincidentally, like 10 for me is like my favorite single issue of the series. Like that was the one I feel like most captured what I wanted to do with the book, that and the annual. And so yeah, it's funny, you miss the extra pages for the lead, but you also like being able to tell different stories. And I wanted to try to get to a bunch of the different Space Knights down the line. Like there's a masked bear Space Knight that a lot of people have been intrigued by just because it's a bear wearing a mask who's also a Space Knight. And so that was sort of the long-term goal, was like, well, let's hopefully tell a lot of these different stories and see what happens. And then, market forces and other things dictate changes. But that was at least the initial thinking.
Is it fair to assume that it was budget restrictions that just like kept you from just adding on more pages to the book for the sake of the backups?
Yeah, I mean, once you've sort of established, and this is probably tedious for people to listen to, is the behind the scenes business stuff. But once you've established,
I'm interested in it, so
all right.
Keep going.
Well, once you have a cost structure for a book, you have 20 pages budgeted at this amount. You can sort of know what each book might throw off revenue wise, and sort of build out your line from there. If you add 4 more pages in and you add another, I don't know, $1,000 or $2,000 to the budget and the bottom line, like at that point in an established book's run, if you don't raise the cover price to match those added costs, like then it throws everything into whack on the business side. So yeah, that wasn't an option without making the book an extra $1, and I didn't want to do that. And so, like I said, we just tried to fit as much into the lead 16 pages as we could, and then also, work in the pages in the back. We did actually on the last issue. The last issue ran 6 pages for the backup, so I did squeeze in 2 extra pages, sort of to the book's like financial detriment. But we wanted to try to tell the story right and not truncate it.
Right. Let's go ahead and take some listener questions, just so we make sure that we get some of these in. This one comes from Broadside on our allspark.com forum. What was the original plan for Beachhead and Grunt's plot line?
Oh God, I don't even know the original plan. Like, you probably have to talk to the writer if. Oh wait, I'm sorry.
Beachhead and Grunt were the 2 in ROM.
Yeah. Let's start over. I'm sorry, I was just thinking Transformers.
Okay, to be fair, G.I. Joe's, a lot of them blur together for me too. So.
Well, no, it was more like, wait, did we plan to have Beachhead and Grunt show up in the Transformer comics too? No, that was all part of the plan of just sort of getting more to the fact that the Wraiths had infiltrated G.I. Joe, and we, when the Wraiths take somebody over, especially if it becomes a long-term thing, like that person is now dead, and there's no coming back. And so we're like, well, a Wraith can't necessarily be Scarlet. And then, I think they hedged that a bit in Revolution with Joe Colton. But, initially the thinking was that, well, if we're gonna have a couple G.I. Joes who are dire Wraiths and we're going to kill them, they probably shouldn't be prominent characters. And so we thought we could get away with Beachhead and Grunt. I liked them because there was an astronaut tie, and so it sort of made sense that one of them might have been, out in space or on the space station. Or I had this whole sort of backstory in mind there, and it was gonna sort of push the Space Knights and some of G.I. Joe into outer space. So that was kind of the initial thinking. But part of it was like, well, who can we safely kill without offending Hasbro and fans of some of these really popular characters and all of that.
Right. Well, that's the thing, because Beachhead and Grunt kind of they were important in the second arc of the book, but then just kind of disappeared. And that actually brings me to the second question, to the second part of Broadside's question, because if you recall, there was a line of dialogue where Grunt said to Beachhead, "We can't think bigger, we have to think smaller." And of course, with Rom and the Micronauts, then being the last arc of the book, it led to a lot of speculation amongst fans that that basically Beachhead and Grunt were going to recruit the Micronauts. Was that kind of the original thinking, or
absolutely? Yeah, and it's funny because like I've just been thinking about the way the story ended up, but yeah, it's a good question because it does remind me of what we originally thought, which was that it was like, well, the Joes realized that Rom is probably too powerful for them, so there's got to be another way to take him down, and so yeah, it was like they were going to be aware of the Micronauts, and they were going to bring the Micronauts in, and that was how Rom and the Micronauts were going to come into contact. Backing up even further, like one thing I had considered doing way at the start was, in trying to think of ways to differentiate Rom and also try to sort of slowly build toward a universe. Rom, when he showed up on Earth, was going to be talking to his armor in the same way that like Tony Stark talks to the Jarvis system in his armor, and so there would be this voice in his armor. You would just think, all right, well, it's sort of an AI inside his suit that he's talking to, and then somewhere down the line you would come to see that no, there was actually a Micronaut that he'd onboarded somewhere along the way in space or in microspace, and was living inside his armor and sort of keeping him sane. Like the thinking, this is going way off the rails now, but like my original thought was, all right, if Rom is, he's been isolated in space for centuries now, and he's fighting this endless war, like not only is he sort of ridden with PTSD, but he's kind of losing his mind from the isolation and just from the hopelessness of it all. And so Rom, like in the past, went insane almost. And so it took having a Micronaut like with him all the time to almost be like his therapist and to like talk him down and keep him calm and keep him centered and everything. And so, yeah, you were going to find out that there was a Micronaut living in his armor at some point. And so, I don't know. I didn't entirely have, where that was going to go from there, but that was how Rom and the Micronauts were going to, first be introduced way back. And then it became like, okay, well, G.I. Joe is going to, get a hold of the Micronauts, and that's how Rom and Micronauts are originally going to fight and then partner up or what have you. And so yeah, it's funny. There were like layers upon layers of plans and plot lines and things like that sort of went through all these different permutations. So yeah, ultimately, like I realized that was a plot line that just sort of stopped, which is, one of the bummers of the series maybe coming to an end sooner than we all wanted.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I feel like, a lot left to explore in the book, and I certainly hope that these kind of threads get picked up in some way, even though, the future of not only Rom, but the whole universe is kind of in question, what with Unicron coming to eat Elonia, because...
Yeah, what the hell?
Which I'm gonna go ahead and, since you're now, totally, separate from the company. Currently, the prevailing theory is that he's going around eating all the planets with the ores on it, which I guess that leads to another question, which you can just confirm this, can't you? That ore is one of Shockwave's ores, right? From the armor?
Sorry, what's that now? The connection just sort of cut out on me.
Oh, sorry.
No, I mean, believe me, every time you ask that question, the connection will cut out on me. So
okay.
I can either confirm or deny. Like they... and for all I know, they may have completely changed course after I left. Like, it might have all been like, okay, Ryall's gone. Let's completely shake this up. And now Unicron is just going to be a friendly, balloon that floats around the universe. Like, we don't know. It might just be a really happy ending and everything. So yeah, I'm not sure where it's all headed or what might be driving him to the different worlds and everything. But I will say that Elonia was originally named, after I sort of used Elon Musk as the starting point for the name. So while I'm talking about ridiculous things that went into the creation of the whole series. And I think, like, we don't want to call it Muskia or something. That doesn't have a good sound to it. So
See, what just gets me is the fact that we have a lot of editors from the TF Wiki and the IDW Wiki who will listen to this show, and I know for a fact that someone's going to race to add that.
Well, even worse, if I can compound it, so the masked bear's name is Nakomi. There was an old children's cartoon I used to watch when I was a kid. It was like Santa and the Three Bears, and one of the bears was Nakomi. It was Nakomi and Chinook. So I named him after a childhood animated bear. So anyway.
See, someone actually did figure that out. I'll go ahead and tell you. Oh, yeah. Speaking of fanway questions, this is a question that me and my co-host Callum, who sadly could not be here today, have long since. And in fact, I'm going to send you a link so that you can answer this. Can you identify two of the knights in this photo? Specifically the one with the twin daggers, the greenish one with the twin daggers in front of Phi Law, and the one in the back with the wings.
I'm trying to think if we ever named them. We might not have named all of them. I mean, honestly, the two I really wanted to use, I wanted to use Nakomi and I wanted to use Cube.
Cube was great. We love Cube. We really do.
So yeah, it's like, it's a bummer because in my perfect world, I would have had a Space Knight series or a Knights of Soulstar Order series or miniseries, you know, and I want to do a Dire Wraiths miniseries to sort of delve more into the Dire Wraiths world and everything. And so yeah, like, you know, it's fun. You get to do a lot of things that you want to do, but the way all of these things work is you never quite get to everything as it starts out in your head, and maybe that's sometimes for the best. You know, because like I say, Rom having being partially crazy and having a Micronaut living in his armor, maybe that wasn't the smartest way to go. I don't know, but it was like it was at least a thought that I'd kicked around.
Right. All right. See, personally, I for the longest time thought that it was Mauer and Bhutan were those two, but Christos Gage apparently said that the one with the wings is not Mauer, so. Or Mar. Mar, yeah, that makes more sense. But yeah, okay, anyways, let's move on from fanwang questions to a different question. This one comes from Marutan, also from our Allspark forum. There we go.
By the way, I love fanwang questions, so, you know, feel free.
Okay, all right. I might have more. He would like to know if there was ever any significant progress made towards reprints of Marvel's ROM and even Micronauts, or whether that remained off the table entirely after those properties kicked off at IDW.
I mean, there were a lot of conversations. Like, that was the thing that originally drove me at the start, was I said, look, I really want those books back in the market like that, and that might actually help a new series if people know what ROM and the Micronauts are all about. And what I really wanted was, you know, the publishers who own the characters to get, you know, whatever money is owed to them, but also skim a portion off of every book and give that to Bill Mantlow's care. And so it was like both from a fan perspective of wanting those reprints out there and also an altruistic perspective of wanting to help provide, you know, care to Bill. And so there were a lot of conversations. It just, you know, again, this is one of those sort of behind the scenes things that is never a whole lot of fun to talk about, but it just gets complicated because of ownership. You know, in the 80s, a lot of these deals weren't exactly ironclad legal agreements that you see now. You know, some of them are things that were written on a scrap of paper, and I'm not saying this was that, but, you know, there's just a lot of legal wrangling and legal figuring out that needs to be done. And also, you know, when paperwork is 30 plus years old, it's not always just filed away in one place, or it's not always digitized and easily able to be grabbed. And so there's just a lot of conversations on the legal end from both sides that need to figure out who owns what, who participates in what percentage, and all of that. But, you know, I'd certainly had a lot of people at all levels of Marvel, you know, up to the top, that really want to see that happen, and same with Hasbro, and same with IDW, and, you know, everybody agrees that there's a lot of good business to be done there too. So I'm still hopeful that it happens. And, you know, at one point I got a box in my office from Dan Buckley, the president of Marvel, who sent me the
the old ROM helmet that they used to.
Oh, right. You have that, don't you?
Yeah, and so that certainly felt to me like a nice bridge, like, okay, well, if the president of Marvel is, acknowledging and sort of approving of the fact that IDW is doing ROM now, then it all feels like things move closer toward that. But yeah, still there's no announcement of, it'll be showing up on Amazon as a pre-order soon. Nothing like that. But I'm still hopeful that it can work out. It's just, at a certain point, it was beyond my ability to easily make happen. But I chased ROM for 10 years before it happened. And so it's one of those things where, like, despite rumors in the internet, I'm still friendly with Hasbro and still trying to, like, push those conversations along and see what happens. So I still hope so. It's funny, because I got tired of waiting years ago and I took my entire ROM series and got bound editions made. But then there's a printer in the Midwest who really wants to be involved in this if it can ever happen. So they printed up a special set of oversized hardcovers of the entire series that they just sent to me a couple weeks ago, just to show me, what they could do. It's sort of a proof of concept, not a thing they ever try to sell. They just made one set of them. So now I have a full set of ROM reprints on my shelf too, but right now it's just the one. And my goal is to make sure that, everybody that wants one can also get one.
Well, I mean, you're talking to someone who spent a lot of money over various years acquiring a complete collection of every ROM appearance in the back issue sections of numerous comic shops and cons. So I would love for people to not have to do what I went through.
Can I guess this is probably a good place to be confessional, but can I admit something sort of pathetic?
What?
So I bound up my series a few years ago. It was like my childhood ROM series, and I picked all the one-shots, like the 2-in-1 and the Hulk issue and Power Man and Iron Fist and all the stuff that had ROM cameos in there, and I put them all in chronological order and bound them in these nice hardcovers.
Hell yeah.
And then ever since, like, I've completely regretted not having the individual issues. So about a month ago, I bought a complete run of ROM, all the annuals, from a retailer in Texas who was selling them. So now So
what? That's like at like 3. Like you now own the complete ROM in what, 3 different ways now?
Yeah. It's a problem.
I don't think it's a problem, but then again, you are literally like, if you're looking at your Skype right now, you see my profile picture, so
Right. There's a guy I know that he's collected over 1,000 copies of his favorite comic ever is Doctor Strange 55, which is beautiful, drawn by Michael Golden. Like, it's a gorgeous comic, but he's bought over 1,000 individual copies, and so I use that as my benchmark. Like, I'm like, well, I'm not that bad. I just have a bound set, a set that somebody made me, and then now individual comics when I want them. So that's where it should stop. I mean, I have a few other assorted single issues also, so I can have them in a spinner rack upstairs too. But that's the extent of my addiction for now.
For now, yes. And of course, I'm sure you have at least one of the classic 1979 figures, and I know for a fact you have one of the more recent figures from the Revolution set that Hasbro.
3 of those, yeah. Well, and I got my original ROM chromed. Somebody chromed it out for me, and so now I kind of want like a non-chrome version, and I don't have one in the box, and so there's still those, There's still some holes to fill. You'll find a way. Still some scouring to do at various conventions.
Nice. Well, I know we're running out of time, so I really just have one question that I'd kind of want to wrap everything up with. Actually, this is really more of a 2-pronged question, but anyways. What do you think is your proud, like, not just ROM, not just Hasbro, but just kind of in general with your career at IDW, what would you say is your proudest achievement, and what would you say is your biggest regret?
I mean, proudest, there's probably a list, that could take some time, but certainly ones that stand out are, I mean, from a broader perspective, like, I've read comics since I was age 5, and so I've loved the industry my entire life. So to be able to contribute to it in the ways that I have for the last, 14, 15 years and more to come, like is incredibly gratifying to me. Like that's really all I ever wanted, was to be able to help contribute and give back in this industry in some ways. So that just in itself has been great. And I appreciate everything IDW allowed and gave me, and, the chances that I was given, to do that. But, on a more specific basis, like bringing back ROM and all the things that came with it, the Mantlo family and Sal and all of that stuff is certainly one of the things that was on my lifelong wish list. I would say also, getting to work with John Byrne as closely as I have for the last 12 years is one of those things. I've gotten to be very close with Harlan Ellison and his wife just as a result of the job. And, being able to help mend fences in that regard with CBS and bring Harlan's original Star Trek script back into comic form. Like there's those kinds of things. And then really there's just the personal relationships and the friendships and the creative collaborations that mean the world to me. Like I've met the best people in my life through this business and stuff. And they have, all positively impacted me and just made my life a much richer thing just by having all of them in my life. And so, and along with that is, the retailers that have supported the different things that I did and we did, and then the fans that have supported them, and, just all of those things, being able to write, like I've written over 100 comics and stuff that have been published, and being able to do that, like all of those things together, like it's weird because people ask me that like while I was at IDW, and I'm like, I don't really know. Like it's just, you keep moving forward. And so just having the last few weeks off, between starting up a new thing has given me a chance to kind of think back to these kinds of things. And because, you never really want to give yourself a chance to be proud of stuff, because then it's like, then you're just looking back and not forward. But, since I've had a few weeks to do that, those are the things that have stood out. And, so many other things beyond that, but those are certainly some of the big ones. I mean, disappointments, like there's bigger things like certain properties that I wanted to bring to market that didn't come to pass. Certainly the ROM reprints is a thing that I've still wanted to make happen that haven't. But, and then there's the more personal disappointments, like the way the whole G.I. Joe thing ended up. Like I tried to do the right thing by the creators, and it somehow got spun into a way that, it made them think we didn't do right by them, but it also made the people that were against them feel vindicated. And so then it was just like, well, God, tried to do the right thing and it ended up pleasing nobody. And, sometimes that happens. Like sometimes things can't be helped, but those, like the personal stuff like that are probably the bigger disappointments, but they're so few and far between from all the positives. Like all the positives so far outweigh any of the negatives that, like, I don't know. It's a thing I've loved the whole time, and it's a thing I continue to love, and a thing I still look forward to doing. So that's sort of the thing that gets me past any of the sort of minor disappointments.
Excellently put. And I lied. I actually have one last question.
Oh, sure.
What's next for Chris Ryall?
Man, I would love to say it. It's funny because unless this goes up today, like there's a chance that what's next for Chris Ryall will be announced before this comes out, but I just don't know yet.
Well, so I can guarantee you it will not be going up today, so it'll probably will not be till like Saturday that this goes up.
And I'm still hedging my bets because, sometimes these things aren't made public when you think they're going to, so it may be this week, it may be next week, but anyway, it's soon. So I took a few weeks off, and I talked to an awful lot of people and sort of got going a lot of different projects that I'd had in mind, and some things with Ashley Wood and some other things. There's a TV thing that's been brewing, and there's a lot of comic stuff that I still want to do and plan to do, and I'm going to do, and I will talk about more as soon as I can. But yeah, it's not quite time to talk about it, but that time's getting closer anyway.
Understandable. Totally get it. Although when you say Ashley Wood, are we talking more robots versus zombies?
No, although I will mention that is certainly doing ZVR with him is, and seeing it get optioned and all the stuff that has allowed is also a great thing, and that's a thing I'm really proud of. And so we're going to do other stuff, not that, but we've got a lot of other things that we've sort of kicked around and come up with. And so, yeah, I mean, I like the idea of doing new things, and certainly working with Ash and working with a lot of the people that I've had such good relationships with. I would like to see that continue in every way possible. So that is all hopefully down the road.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining me for this hour. Wish we had more time, but I know you got stuff to do. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show, joining me, answering some questions, and giving us a little peek behind the curtain. And I, of course, wish you luck in all your future endeavors. Real quick before you go, why don't you plug some of the places that people can find you, so they can engage with you further?
I'm trying to think if that's a smart idea. The way there's been some recent attacks on Twitter, but yeah, it's Chris_Ryall, Ryall, at Instagram and Twitter. I've largely just sort of slowed down on all of that because I'm like
probably smart move.
Just being in between jobs. Like I haven't, I'll post nonsense, but not a lot of work related stuff anyway right now. But that also should change soon. And then, I'm still on Facebook, although not really doing a whole lot there. But yeah, the usual places, Chris Ryall, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr. I'll occasionally post artwork, that kind of stuff. But the usual spots.
Alrighty. And of course, you can continue to follow Action and Adventure on Twitter at Hasbro Podcast, on Tumblr at HasbroUniversePodcast.tumblr.com, and of course, as always, check us out on Libsyn, iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn, wherever podcasts are found, and our great hosts at allspark.com. They're a fantastic Transformers site. Join the forums and join our nerdy conversations about not just Transformers, but ROM, Micronauts, and the whole Hasbro universe. And of course,
to that point, sorry if I could just end things by saying thank you to all the fans there too, and certainly to you for talking to me here, but just the fans there and at other forums over the years. Like I loved the early days because I used to be able to engage with everybody much more directly than the last few years have allowed. But like the opinions and the feedback and the passion, and whether they've loved or hated what we're doing, and everybody in between, like I appreciate the opinions and the fact that people care to the degree that they have. And so just, a final thank you to all of you guys for the support.
Well put. Yes. So thank you so much, Chris.
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
This is Rom, the Space Knight. You can imagine he comes from another galaxy with his flashing neutralizer. Activate Rom. You can imagine he has rockets to blast into space and a translator that communicates with lights and sounds. You can even imagine his respirator lets him breathe in any atmosphere. Rom comes with the 3 plug-in accessories shown. 9-volt battery not included. Rom, the Space Knight, an electronic toy new from Parker Brothers.